Hi, Ian.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very excited about our Guardian email summaries live stream this morning.
Me too. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I see you've posted in the chat.
Yeah, so if people are watching this and you're signed in using a personal YouTube account, then you can say hello in the chat, share your Twitter handle, and post and ask questions as we go. If you're watching from a Glow account, then you probably can't interact in the chat. So save your questions up and email them to Karen afterwards.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to very quickly, while I do the introduction, you can always sign in with your own personal email account. You can take part in the chat.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice if people can say hello, take part in the chat, because then as things come up, you can ask questions, and if we just haven't quite got explanations clear enough with anything, then we can kind of dive into a bit more detail and help out with that. So I think that's
absolutely
worth doing. So Karen, I think you're kind of kicking us off with just a little bit of introduction about email summaries and kind of how they've come about.
Yep, let's get started. Okay, so good morning and welcome folks to our webinar. We're going to be looking at a feature of Google Classroom called Guardian Email Summaries. We'll cover what it is, importantly what it isn't, and some experience from Larkhall Academy that did the pilot for us, as well as some of the guidance which has already been posted out to head teachers and where to find some additional help and support if this is something that you want to make use of in your establishment. So in a moment, I'm going to pass you over to Ian Vosser, who is the Faculty Head of Digital Literacy and Enterprise at Larkhall Academy. Ian's also a Google Innovator, and Larkhall is a Google reference school, so that really made Ian the ideal person and Larkhall Academy the ideal school to conduct the pilot on SLC's behalf for Education Scotland. But first, just a wee quick overview of what Guardian Email Summaries is. So it's a feature of Google Classroom. It's already enabled in South Lanarkshire. There's no need for you to request for it to be turned on, and it doesn't incur any additional cost to your school or the local authority. And it's basically a way of giving regular feedback to Guardians and explaining sort of what's been happening in the classroom that their children's a member of throughout the week. So it'll show things like class activity, announcements, questions that have been posted. It will importantly show upcoming work that has to be completed and deadlines, and also crucially the work that perhaps hasn't yet been completed, anything that's missing. So a really cool communication tool that's already just sitting there ready to be used. I think it's really important though to point out what it doesn't do. So it doesn't actually give the I meant to say it does actually allow you to change the frequency with which you receive the emails if you're a Guardian. So it's set up automatically to send out weekly, but you can, if you have a Gmail account, change that to daily. But important to stress, you don't need to have a Gmail account if you're happy to stay with the setting as weekly. And we'll cover a bit more of the kind of nuts and bolts and setup a wee bit later on. So, as I said, there's some things it doesn't do. It doesn't give Guardians direct access to the classroom that the child's a member of. So that's maybe perhaps reassuring for staff. It doesn't give access to the stream or anything like that. It is literally just a snapshot of what's been happening across the classroom. It also doesn't give access to the actual assignments themselves. So in terms of sharing files and so on, that doesn't happen with Classroom, with the Guardian emails. And I think as well, important for staff to know that this doesn't open some portal to them. It is an automated email which is sent out. There is no way for a parent to reply directly back to the teacher. So hopefully that's quite reassuring for staff to know that. So I think a really nice communication tool for you to perhaps consider using as an additional way of looking at that parental contact. I think it's also a really nice way of children being able to have quite a positive and meaningful conversation with folks at home about what's been happening in their classrooms. And as you're going to hear from Ian in a second, it's basically can really facilitate some nice, meaningful conversations there. So I think I've covered the overview, Ian. Have I missed anything?
No, I think that was really great, Karen. So I think with the kind of 3 areas of work that the email is split into, and when we look at some examples and talk through it, I think being really clear that it's just taking the title and the description of the tasks that have been posted. So there's no access into the system, if that makes sense. So that the missing work is a section that would have the due date and when it was due, so the work would be classed as late. So it's just saying this work is late. Here is the title, here is the description, and then same again with the work that's upcoming. It's picking up the due date, seeing that it's either due the next day with the daily summaries or within the next week on the weekly summaries, and saying here is a due date that's coming up. So if you're not posting due dates on the work, then the missing and the upcoming features won't be working. And then with the class activity, your announcements, your assignments, your questions, your materials, all of that is again just posting the title and the description that goes with it. So
and you're going to show some really nice examples of that for people to actually see what that looks like.
So we won't be using real examples from the pilot. We'll be using some that we've kind of made up. So the actual content in them probably isn't that great, but I think it's really nice to be able to see what they look like. I just give us a little shout out to our viewer Paul Casey, who is watching from abroad just after 5 p.m. local time for him. So joining us after work.
Hi Paul, nice to see you.
Thanks very much, Paul, for coming, and lots of other people in the chat saying hello and introducing themselves. So that's great that we've got people watching, and it's also great that people are in the chat. So if you've got any questions as we go along, please do post them in. So a little bit then about the pilot, Karen, if you're...
Yep, that'd be great, Ian.
Okay. So Education Scotland were looking at turning on Google Guardian email summaries, and I think there were 2 councils, one slightly further north than ourselves, who were looking at piloting that and just trying to work out how it works, within the Glow tenancy. So I guess there was some kind of technical work that needed to happen, which we tried to support with providing feedback, but also in terms of operationally for schools to be able to roll this out across the local authority. There's kind of the administration side of getting set up, and then there's the side where you're kind of running it and providing some training to staff to get it off the ground, and then just kind of day-to-day stuff, kind of keeping the system going. So for Lark Hall Academy pilot, we put all of S2 and S5 parents and carers, informed home that we were part of the pilot, and if they didn't wish to be part of it, to let us know. We use the data from CMUS, and we capture that data annually as part of the data check. And we were using the main contact information for Guardians. And before we went through that process of adding the email addresses to the system, we did run them past the pupil support team and the DHT team, just to make sure that there wasn't any child protection issues that myself as an ICT coordinator might not have been aware of, but would have meant that it would have been inappropriate now for the main contact to be receiving information about the child. So I guess that's one thing that we always need to kind of give consideration to, is we're collecting data and we're putting it into a computer system. We need to make sure we're processing it correctly, and at all times we know we're sharing the right information with the right learners. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we're going through a little demonstration of how it works. So we only sent the invitation out once, and then we didn't send any further information about it. So if people didn't choose to sign up in that first wave, then there wasn't a further opportunity. Now we've moved a bit on from the pilot, and we've got it switched on for all our year groups. Parents who didn't get signed up in that kind of initial pilot phase, we've gone back and said, if you wanted to sign up now, it's kind of not too late to be able to join. So we had quite a high uptake, 53% of our S2 parents and 43% of our S5 parents. And then we had a selection of parents who didn't accept the invitation. And then obviously another group of parents who we either didn't have the contact details for, or they weren't looking to be receiving email communications. But I'd certainly say we've increased the number of email addresses that we've got since entering this kind of lockdown situation, because email and communicating digitally has certainly been something we've been doing more of with parents. And I think as part of our annual data check, with this coming session, the collection of email addresses and the entry of email addresses into CMUS as our data management system, the kind of accuracy of that is going to be really important this year, because obviously with the data being typed in manually, there is occasions obviously where mistakes are made, and we need to make sure the quality of that data is really, really high, because we don't want to inadvertently be emailing the wrong person about children. Obviously, though, the risk is pretty small there, because the classroom summaries aren't containing personal information about the child. They're really just work activities, but you just want to be mindful that emails are going to the right place. And in terms of when people were signing up, we did it across kind of morning time, 9 till 12 in the morning, and I was really surprised by kind of mid-afternoon we had quite a high uptake. So parents were keen to sign up as soon as it came in. So that's really very positive. So the initial feedback that we received from learners, and I'll show you this when I go into the demonstration as well, is that there was work that they had been doing that had been identified as missing in the email summary. And that's because children at the time weren't making sure they pressed that button that said markers done, submitted, hand in, turn in. Depending on which screen you're on in Google Classroom, or if you're working within a doc or a slide, it has slightly different terminology, but all the buttons do the same thing. They just mark on the system that the work has been done. So young people aren't doing that, and the email is sent home. So they go home 4 o'clock daily, or 4 o'clock on a Friday for the weekly ones. So if the button hasn't been pressed by then, and the work should have been done by that time, then it will be marked as missing in the email. So one of the interesting things that we've seen in lockdown is occasionally a child will be marking work as done, but then there won't be anything there and no evidence that they've done anything. So I guess that's one way children look at work around a system, don't they? But that's easily flagged up by the teacher. I think what was really lovely is within the first week I'd had a few emails from parents, so guardians, as we like to call them, and overwhelmingly really positive, just about opening the conversation about what work is happening at home. And for us at Larkhall Academy, the focus wasn't about using this as a tool to make sure we were sending homework home. The tool was about creating opportunities to be able to facilitate discussions at home which support discussions around learning. So what are they learning in class, and if there is a homework activity or something that needs to be done, then we were making it clear that the expectation was that the task would be done at home. For children with additional support needs, just really helped open the door with communication in terms of what work needed to be done, but also I think for kind of wider mainstream young people as well, being able to keep a track of what has been happening in class, because especially for kind of secondary age children, what have you done at school today, can sometimes be the reply. And I also think for primary age children, being able to support them in the work that they're doing when they get home, and be able to kind of maybe have a deeper conversation about the learning, I think is really important. And one of the questions that we received a couple of times was, why aren't all teachers using this? And I know in the pilot we allow teaching staff to opt in, so it was a choice to be able to have the guardian email summaries switched on, whereas I can see in the guidance coming out from SLC, we're kind of strongly encouraging that it's a whole school approach. And I think if you look at whole school adoption, the quality of the emails that go home is going to be better. I think in the primary setting, where generally speaking there's 1 or 2 teachers across a week for a class, plus maybe some peripatetic specialists, maybe a class by class basis would be easier. But from a secondary point of view, if you're looking for quality emails spread across these areas, then encouraging or asking everyone to switch it on, I think, is really important. But that's really important in terms of the granular control. So you can choose which classrooms are turned on and off. So, for example, if you've got a lunchtime club with a Google Classroom, you don't need to be having guardian emails sent home for that. So the pilot then ran for 10 weeks. So if we kind of roll on 10 weeks later, during the pilot itself, once we'd gone through the process of setting up and the teachers had switched on, and we had a few inquiries from parents about just maybe understanding the content, but they could access the emails fine. It was what teachers were posting. They wanted, I guess, a little bit kind of more information there. There was really very little going on, so we were undertaking kind of quality assurance of about 30 emails a week, and really interesting to see the different types of learner experiences depending on which practical sets they were in S2 or in the senior phase. So some children who had 3 or 4 teachers who had opted in were getting so this is in S5, 3 or 4 teachers out of their 5 subject areas were getting quite full emails, where other young people who were only maybe working with one child, one teacher who had turned on their emails were smaller. So good reason to have a whole school experience. So 10 weeks later, we undertook a little review. Learner feedback was pretty positive. A few kind of questioning whether they really needed it, in terms of lots of information was being shared with home now, which maybe wasn't before. So that, I guess, has led to some kind of increase in conversations. But generally speaking, they thought it was a good idea, a good concept, and I think some useful feedback there about my mum has asked me if the work on the email is complete or not completed, and because obviously it's picking up materials and things as well. I can see why the learners are asking for that, but I would suggest actually, that's part of the process of having the emails, is opening that conversation. All right, okay, I've seen you've been doing this in class. Tell me a bit more about it. So, one of the big ones I particularly like was, it would be good if all the teachers were using it. And I think we now have a much greater increase on Google Classroom than we did before the lockdown situation. And I also think when we return for blended learning in August, being able to communicate easily at home, I think this is absolutely going to increase what we're doing. Feedback from staff, kind of no workload issues, because if you're already using Google Classroom, it's just a case of turning on the feature. And if you weren't using Google Classroom, I guess there was a bit of kind of getting to grips with the Google Classroom system. But in terms of once it's switched on, there's no additional work for the teacher. I think the teachers were maybe more mindful in terms of how they worded their Google Classroom activities when they knew it was also going home to a parental audience. So, a nice title that is clear, but I would suggest that's good practice anyway. But the description box, where we may have left that blank before, we might have seen that we've been maybe a bit more clear in terms of what the success criteria is, or a little clearer in terms of what the activity is. And I think that not only helps the young people, but it also helps their parents when they're having those discussions. A couple of people needed just a little bit of support, I think, more in terms of confidence kind of things, or can you just kind of make sure I've turned this on correctly, as opposed to they didn't know how to do it, because it's a nice simple button. And a few members of staff could see that parents had accepted Guardian invites, but they hadn't switched on for their class. So there was, I guess, a bit of concern there that they were part of the pilot. So there's full visibility across all Google Classrooms. So when a child's Guardian is added, all the teachers who teach that child can see the email address or the name of the recipient. But that doesn't mean emails are going home unless they have switched on for their classroom. So I think that's a really important message to send out to teaching staff. You'll be able to see the email addresses, but you're not switched on unless you've turned it on. Guardian feedback at the end was broadly positive. I think depending on parents who had children in S2 and S5 or had twins, they were the ones who probably saw the greatest discrepancy in terms of the content in emails. If one child had lots of teachers and who were switched on and the other didn't, but very positive of the idea. And when we kind of did some kind of percentage feedback, 100% of parents wanted to continue receiving this email. And we also surveyed parents who didn't sign up, and the feedback there was, I didn't know about it, I wanted to sign up. So we didn't go back to parents who didn't sign up and say, well, did you really mean to, did you really want to sign up to this? And maybe that's something we should have done, but based on the feedback, we made contact with those parents who hadn't signed up and made it available. So staff feedback, opportunity to increase home communication, lots of love for the Google Classroom, which was lovely to see. And I think anything that's helping keep parents updated about what their child is doing is so very, very important. So a couple more comments there. Okay, so Karen, I think that's in terms of an overview of the pilot, broadly very, very positive, and I guess teachers tweaking their practices as we went on, and learners tweaking their activity in terms of making sure they're marking things as done, and parents kind of learning what the different bits of the email mean. Apart from that, I think it all very good.
Yeah, and that's largely why I think we got to a position once it was presented to Education Scotland that they decided to go forward with it, and that was largely down to the huge amount of work that you guys did at Lark Hall, and the quality of information we got back from the pilot, and it has really informed things. And I think every school will have its own experience, obviously, but a couple of things obviously you touched on already, Ian. I just want to kind of go into just a little bit more depth. As I mentioned at the beginning, head teachers have already received the guidance from us with regards to how you might want to implement this in your school, and probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks for an establishment will be getting started with it, because there is an admin overhead to this. So as you mentioned, Ian, there was no way of taking I don't know if you mentioned, but obviously we keep data about parents' emails in CMIS, and unfortunately there is no way of us automating that process into Classroom. So, and I know that you can talk a bit more about this, but it does mean that someone has to make a decision in the school as to how do you then get that information into the Classroom. And we've put in the guidance some sort of suggestions around that, but I think it's just to be mindful of the fact that there's a chunk of work to be done, and as you said, Ian, the quality of the data that goes in there, it's absolutely crucial that it is correct, and that it's something that's a whole school decision. So we have said that we strongly believe this should be a whole school approach, and that's not to say we think every single Google Classroom that exists in your school should be captured in the Guardian emails. We're not saying that, because it wouldn't always be appropriate. It has to be relevant information that's going home to parents. But what we are saying is that this should not be a decision taken by an individual teacher in a school as to whether or not they start using this. So it's something that if we do have some teachers watching this morning, and I know we do, you really need to go and speak to your head teacher about this if it's something that you're quite keen to use, because there are safeguarding issues around this that we need to be very, very mindful of. So
I think that's really important, isn't it, Karen?
Yeah.
If I'm teaching and watching this, I can't just go and find email addresses for my class, or I've done some emailing because we've been in lockdown now. I've got that data. I can't just fire it in. There's a little bit of a school process that needs to happen. So the decision is being led by the head teacher, but it can be that teachers then do the administration around adding the email addresses in.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So it's really, that's really crucial first sort of thing to really stress. There's also, as you mentioned, Ian, all the teachers are then going to see the Guardian email sitting in there. So I suppose there's a bit of a risk in terms of perhaps a teacher adding another Guardian in, thinking that's maybe quite helpful, or removing Guardians. So if you remove a Guardian, it removes them from every single classroom, etc. So that's why, again, you really need to have a few people who kind of get their head around this and understand how it works before you then launch into it, and making sure all staff are aware of it. And I think, Ian, you mentioned that some of your staff were a bit concerned that they hadn't opted in, yet they thought it looked like they had.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just because once the Guardian information is added, it's added to the child, and that child is obviously spread across multiple classrooms. So a question here that Paul is just highlighting is if you've got a parent with multiple children, then they need to sign up for each child, and they will receive a separate email for each child that they have. So it isn't combined into family newsletters. They have a Gmail account, and they are going in to look at their frequency settings, as a parent, they will see all the children that they are signed up for. So they could, for instance, have a weekly summary for child number 1, and they could have a daily summary for child number 2, and they could have it switched off for child number 3 if they wanted to. So
yeah,
that's normally how it works, isn't it? Most interest in the first child. And then,
I couldn't possibly comment, and you'll get into big trouble for saying that.
well,
This is being recorded, remember.
Yeah, let's hope Mrs. Rosser isn't watching.
So yeah, that's a really good point that Paul was making there. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're taking the kind of admin overhead, thinking about your GDPR implications. So something that, again, really stressing to senior management who may be watching, who are thinking about this, really imperative that the procedures you've currently got in place to manage data in relation to safeguarding, make sure that this, you extend that to encompass this, because that's going to be really, really important going forward, particularly if you think about some groups like looked after children.
So, that's why the head teacher, DHT, pupil support team, it's really important they know that Guardian email is being used, because if a child protection concern comes in and, information about a child or that child's activity shouldn't be going somewhere, you need the ability to be able to go in and, remove that Guardian in a timely fashion. So,
yeah.
If it's not a whole school approach, then you can certainly have, potentially come a little bit unstuck there. So just a question in here from Jim. Can more than one parent be assigned to a child? Yes, absolutely. So you can add, I think the limit is 20 guardians. So I don't think anyone's got more than 20 parents, uncles, aunts, and grandmas and granddads all in there. And I'll show you when we get to the demo just what it looks like when you've got a single guardian and multiple guardians signed up as well.
Yeah, that would be really good, Ian. So last kind of sort of thing for me, just a couple more points. And Ian, you kind of touched on this as well, managing expectations. So in Lark Hall, because it was a pilot, we decided to go with 2-year groups. So obviously there were going to be gaps, and parents kind of responded to that and saying, "Oh, I'd like this for all of my children's classes." And if that's only natural that they would think like that. So again, this is about senior management taking maybe a whole school view of this in terms of how they would want to manage it and how they communicate with parents, because they are going to expect to see it for every child they have, for every teacher that teaches their child. And that's probably, that's not unreasonable to think that they would just assume that they're going to get a summary from each classroom. And I think it maybe provides a more consistent and quite a coherent experience then for parents and carers, if you do take that approach. And just a tiny wee thing about teacher workload here. If you're already using a system, and I won't name any names, that perhaps captures homework, in terms of teacher workload, Guardian emails, if you're using Classroom and you're posting what homework's due, etc., there is no additional workload issue there, because it's all automated, and it's probably not even you, the teacher, who's had to put the email in. So you literally don't have to do anything else, but that extra layer of communication is there. And I particularly like Guardian email because I think, as Ian said, it isn't just about homework, and particularly in a secondary setting, when perhaps for some subject areas, if you think about first year, you maybe only see that child once a week. How much homework realistically you're going to be given once a week? Perhaps not that much. Whereas with Guardian email, really it captures the learning that's been happening across that class, that subject area. So you're very much present in that Guardian email that's gone home, whereas maybe in other systems you're perhaps missing quite a lot of the time.
And so I think that's what the big appeal for us was. It was about capturing all the learning and trying to enable conversations at home about learning, as opposed to using it as a system to communicate what homework needed to be done, and what the expectation was in terms of setting homework. So we were focused on conversations about learning, and I think that's maybe shifted slightly now in terms of an expectation in terms of helping parents understand what learning should be being done at home. And I wonder when we go to a blended learning approach whether we'll be tweaking again, what that looks like. And as a principal teacher team, we've got some meetings lined up to discuss what that should look like, and working out how Guardian email sits within that. It will be part of the discussions as well.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting discussion. It's good to get maybe some feedback on that as well, Ian. So final thing, communication, and that really is about making sure that everyone knows what this is. So you really have to give parents the option here in terms of whether they want to receive an email from you, an automated email that says, do you want to opt into this service? So there's a layer of communication that has to go out about that. And in the guidance we've issued, we've provided some examples, and a thank you to Stirling High School, who we kind of contacted before we started all of this, just to get a wee feel for they had been starting to use it. So, and they very kindly donated some of their stuff to us. So we've made use of some of that in our guidance as well. So there's an exemplar there if you want to use it that you can send to parents. But also important, you inform staff about this. So there's some stuff for staff as well, and also for the learners too. Don't know if there's anything else you want to say around the communication side, Ian, before we move on to demo.
No, I think that's, the key is just making sure that all the different stakeholders understand, what's happening and why it's happening, because, people just like to be kept up to date, don't they? So, being able to just provide that clarity in terms of whether you're switched on or not switched on, our parents saying what I'm typing, reassures staff. And it might be you want to do a bit of training with children about marking things as done and handing in and that kind of stuff before you start sending emails on.
Yeah, but that's what I also like about it, because as a teacher who used Classroom a lot, it drove me insane that they didn't click mark as done, because then you've all these assignments and so on that look as if they're not done, and actually they had. Interesting to hear you saying that they're now doing it the other way, but that's kids for you, isn't it? Okay, demo time, exciting.
Excellent. Okay, I will stop sharing that screen and just pick up a different one. So what we've got here is just some demonstration classrooms that I've set up as a teacher in a demonstration environment. So we're just doing this demo outside of the Glow environment, just so we don't accidentally kind of share any data or information, but it will work and operate in the same way. And if there's any differences, I'll point them out as I go along. So I wanted to generate some emails before we started the pilot. So the kind of dates surrounding this are kind of August, September time last year, and because that's kind of when we did the test phase before we rolled this out. So I'm just going to go into this history class. So I'm in as a teacher, and if I go into my people's page, I can see I've got a couple of teachers in the classroom. And I've also got some students here as well. So at the moment, I've got 3 students in the classroom. I've got a Karen pupil, and Karen's got 3 guardians that we've connected to her account. I've got an Ian pupil account where I've just got 1 guardian attached, and then I've got an option here where it says invite guardians, because this Mr. Vosser account that I've just added doesn't have any guardians attached. So any member of staff will have the invite guardian option, but it only needs to happen once. And once the invite guardian has happened, it will go across all their classrooms. So if I just click on that there, it's just then a case of typing in the email address of the person that you want to invite. So if I just type in my Glow account, sch.uk. So because that's not going to be in the directory, it will come up with no picture or anything, and I can just click on that and then press invite. And that is a manual process for each child. So one of the ways that we have done that is we've set up year group classrooms. We've gone through each individual child and done the invite that way. If you were primary school and you'd had the classes already created, you might just do it on a class by class basis. That might be something a teacher does, or you could add a member of your administration team, and they can go through the process of inviting the learners. And that's really a school-based decision in terms of who is responsible for doing it and who's responsible for maintaining it. But somebody just needs to do that, and you just need to have clarity in the decision that you've made there. So it sits with an invited word bracket in the brackets after the email address until somebody has accepted that invite. If I see up here, I've got a button that says email all guardians. Now we have Gmail switched off, so that button won't work. And in the more option here after the child's information, you'll see here you've got an option to email the guardian of that child. That option won't work as well. So it's kind of important that you ignore that and don't try doing direct email from using this information. The information is in the system to facilitate the guardian email summaries, not for any other kind of communication. So also on that more option, you can see here I have the option to invite more guardians, or I have the option to remove guardians. So I see Karen's got 3 guardians here, so we can look at removing one of those. And when I click on remove guardians, it's just a case of using a tick box and then remove remove the notifications there. So I've now removed one of the 3 guardians, and you can see here there's just 2 guardians. So providing you remove before 4 o'clock of the day the emails to go out, there won't be any further emails that go out after that time. So we have the guardian information in, but we need to make sure that we have the guardian email feature switched on in the classroom. So this is an action that all teachers will need to be able to take. If you're a teacher in one class, you can switch it on for all your classes, and any teacher in your classroom could switch it on for you. So I guess if you've got co-teachers, it's just worth about having a bit of communication saying, I'm switching on the Google Classroom Guardian email feature. So if I go up into the settings cog here and scroll down, in the general section, you'll see here it says Guardian Summaries. You just need to make sure that box is toggled on. So I'll just toggle it off for now and press save. So I've now switched Guardian email off for this demonstration class. If I go into my settings, I can see it switched off. So I can switch it back on. And when I go to switch it on, this is what you'll see. Add class to Guardian email summaries. And if you leave this box ticked, this will add all the classes for that you teach in, even the ones where you're a co-teacher. So it's not about you being the owner of the class, it's about you being a teacher. So if you teach in the classroom and that box is ticked, you'll switch on for all your classes, which is absolutely fine in this case here. So I've added the class there. Didn't press save. And the setting has been saved. I get a little message down here. So just in terms of looking at the classwork in this page, I set up some assignments with some different dates, got some people to hand them in and not hand them in, just to create the different emails. So what's going home is the title and the description here. So that's just worth highlighting the information. So you've got the title and the description. Okay, as a teacher, that's everything. So you've seen there how to administer the email addresses, how to add and remove, and also how to switch on for the classrooms. Karen, is that kind of everything covered there from a kind of teacher point of view?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, really. And just to be clear, in terms of who puts those email addresses in, that has to be a decision taken by the head teacher, effectively, as to who manages that.
Okay, that's good. So I'm just going to change here just very quickly, just to look at a learner account. So this is the learner who's sitting in the classrooms. So I'll just go into that history class that we just had there. So in the people page, there's no information about them having a guardian in there, so they don't have any oversight in classroom of that, and they just the classroom experience doesn't change for a learner basically. But if I go into the Gmail account for them, so this isn't Gmail for InGlow, it's in their Office 365 account that they would go into. So if I just scroll down, I need to go to the second page. So they got an email when a guardian is added, and it goes to their @sl.glow.scots email address, which automatically forwards onto their @glow.sch.uk account. So they will see this email in their Glow mail, even though it was sent to their Gmail account. So everything just automatically forwards on. Oh, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? So, when you add a guardian, the child does get to see that, and it just tells them in an email who has been added. So that's just another safeguarding feature to keep them aware that a guardian has been added. And if I go back into the inbox here, when a guardian is removed from the account, you get an email as well saying the guardian has been removed. So they will know that a guardian has been associated or disassociated with the account, that they can't do the associating and they can't do the disassociating. They're just made aware of it. And then you can also see all my other notifications that have come in from that class. I can see I've got quite a lot of stuff still due, so I will busy myself with that later. Okay. So we've had a look at what it looks like from the teacher point of view and the learner point of view. A quick look at the Guardian experience. So the Guardian has no access to Google Classroom. So all of the email experience all their experience is based around what they can see in the email. So I'm going to first off look at a daily summary for my child Ian here. So this one is from the 21st of August last year. So this clearly shows the 3 different sections that they get in the email. So student work missing from last week. So there was a due date set. They have missed the due date, so it is included in the missing section. So you can see here, I didn't do very well that week, missing 4 pieces of work. Due in the next few days. So I once again have a list here of work that has still to be completed, and it is due to be in. And then there is class activity. So if a material or an assignment has been set, but the due date is further away than in the next few days, you can see that information in the class activity. So depending on how many assignments, how many materials, questions, and announcements that you're posting, that will kind of depend on how much information goes into the email. So, that's quite a full email, I would suggest.
And worth pointing out, Ian, for that one, obviously they have to be able to go into a Gmail account to change the setting to be daily.
Yeah. So if we just look at I'll close that tab just so I don't confuse myself. So if I go back to my inbox, so I have a weekly summary here from the 16th to the 23rd of August. So this is for the learner Karen. So because it's a weekly update, I would suggest it's slightly longer. Karen, very studious. No missing work, you'll see, because all the work is done. So that's excellent. Well done. But once again, work that is due in terms of coming up, and then class activity that has been recently posted. I would certainly suggest where you've got your description box, you're keeping it relatively concise. So if you're finding you're writing massive descriptions, it might be that you add that as a resource as a doc, or presenting that in a different way. I certainly know what we're doing a lot of at the moment is title, the description, just a very basic overview of what the activity involves, and then in the link section we're putting up a video alongside that to explain what we're looking for from young people. But the link to the video isn't included in this unless you actually paste the link into the description. So we've decided we're putting the link as a link in Classroom, not in the description, so then only the young person can access it. And if they decide then to share that with their parent, then that's fine. But we're not sending YouTube videos of ourselves or videos that saved on Drive home to the parents in these summary emails. So because this is a Gmail account, at the bottom of the emails I have the settings for parents and the unsubscribe option for parents. So if I just click on the settings here, this is the settings. This is the settings. I have multiple accounts signed in, so it has confused itself by which account it is. We will try again. I will try again.
A man of many accounts, Ian.
I know. So hopefully it'll be simpler for parents. I'll need to sign out.
But I think just while you find your account, just worthwhile saying, if you looked at that email summary for the week, loads of things to talk to your child about there in terms of their learning. And hopefully you can at least start the conversation on a really positive note. And it just gives parents, I think, something to say, other than, as you said earlier, Ian, the how was school today? A teenager is not going to respond particularly enthusiastically to that question, probably. You've got a little bit of material here to work with, hopefully.
I'm now signed in. So let's try pressing that settings button again. I had that really horrible feeling I wasn't going to remember the password as well, but it's okay. So if you have a Gmail account and you don't have 10 Gmail accounts all connected, I guess there's an important point there. It picks up the primary account because I'm signed into Google Chrome. If you experience that problem, you could also use the incognito window. So then you would only have one account signed in. But I've signed out of everything. I'm signed into one account, which is the Guardian account. So I can see here I've got my frequency options for my different children. So Ian Vosser pupil is getting them daily. Karen pupil is getting weekly. And I can also change which time zone I'm in. So if you don't want emails coming in at 4 o'clock, you could adjust your time zone there. But I don't think any parents will be doing that unless they live abroad. We don't have a boarding option, do we, in South Lanarkshire, Karen? Okay, so that's how they control that there. They also have the option to be able to unsubscribe. So if you click on the unsubscribe link, you've unsubscribed immediately, but you do have the option to go in and edit your settings. So you can see I'm back to no summaries, and I can change that to daily, just like so.
And I think we've put that in the guidance. The letter that you can send out to parents that we've provided has this information in it.
And then a final note is at the bottom of the emails that parents receive, is this email helpful? Send feedback. So that is feedback about the email in terms of how it looks and receiving it. It's not feedback to the school. So you will never get that feedback. That is feedback that goes to Google. So I don't think we've had any parents sending feedback to Google on it. I've certainly sent feedback to them in terms of tweaks they could make. But it might just be worth highlighting that to parents if you're doing a support session. That is a contact to Google, not a contact to the school. But I think that's all the kind of contents of the email, settings, and unsubscribing for parents.
So I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions on that so far. Looks as if everyone's quite happy.
As you say, drop them in the chat if there is, and we can certainly come back and look at them. I think I think the great thing about the system is it's super simple, and the advantage of that is you can't break it, you can't really do anything wrong. But equally, I've had a couple of questions from members of staff saying, I'd like to see the summary email that went out last Friday. You can't provide that isn't an option that is available. So, if a parent has got a concern about an email, I would suggest that they forward it into the school as well.
Yeah.
You ask for a copy of it, and especially our pupil support team, they provide a lot of the kind of frontline response to that. So they just ask the email to them, and they can then.
You mentioned earlier, Ian, was sort of quality assurance and as a check almost that the email has gone out every week as part of the pilot. I think you added yourself to a number of.
So accounts. I added myself as a guardian to a selection of children across our 12 practical sets in second year, and then I picked about 20 children across our S5 year group just to kind of see the type of content that was coming out. And I think whether a member of staff is added as a guardian, either for kind of quality assurance or for kind of monitoring the system purposes, that very much rests at a head teacher level. So at the moment at Lark Hall Academy, I've removed myself as the guardian from those children. I'm not receiving those emails anymore. So we're not monitoring the weekly emails that are going out, and just asking parents if there is a concern to kind of forward them in, and then attach their question to the forward. And I can only think of a handful of occasions where that's happened, and it's normally parents wanting a bit more information because they're not actually sure if their child really has done it or not done it.
Yeah, and again, that's about also managing expectations as to how much information you're going to be sending home as part of these weekly emails. You know, sometimes it's never enough. So there's a bit of work to do there around educating the parents as to what this actually is, and it's not about adding to teacher workload. It's really meant to be something that helps. So anything else really from the pilot, Ian, that you feel would be worth sharing with people? I suppose really more than anything since the pilot. So as a school, you decided to keep going with Guardian Email. You were allowed to do that. That was the deal with Education Scotland. Have you rolled it out now to more year groups?
Yeah, so with all year groups turned on, and we really brought that forward because of the lockdown situation in March. I imagine we would have been a bit slower with the process, and probably in an ideal world we've done a little bit more talking to the young people about making sure they were pressing submit, handing in, that the emails were coming home. We probably would have done a bit more with parents in terms of getting some support videos together for parents, just so they could see some of those demo emails there, just so they have a kind of a feeling of what they mean, and what the content in them is. But I guess the situation was the situation, so we did the best that we could, if that makes sense. And bar having to remove a couple of children from the email summaries, just because of family circumstances that have changed. Bereavement, for example, they were not wanting any communication from the school for a little while, while they kind of process that. So being able to have that control to kind of turn it off for a bit and then put it back on, that's really powerful.
Excellent. Okay, so I think all that's left to say is, where do you go for more help and support? As I've said, the guidance has already gone out to head teachers, and it includes screenshots of a lot of the stuff that you've just gone through, Ian. But clearly this webinar is now going to be available as a recording, and that will be on the SLC Staff Learning Centre, which is in your local authority launchpad in Glow. And in that website, the new website, which Ian also helped us to put together, we've got a digital section, and in there is a live streams and recordings bit that you can go to see both what's coming up and then after the webinars, the recordings of each of them, so that this would be something that you could use then to go back through and have a look at the actual demo that Ian's done there, which might be quite helpful to share with staff as well. There's also some information on Glow Connect, which is the national Glow platform. You don't need to send into Glow to get into Glow Connect, so it's maybe even something you can point parents to as well. And finally, Google obviously have support pages too, where you can see examples and so on. Only caveat to that is that some of the sort of functions, the way Guardian's email works in Glow is just a wee bit different. So obviously Ian showed you there how we've got G Suite, Gmail turned off. So there's some things that you can't do on our system that you could if this was out with the Glow tenancy. But generally speaking, the advice from Google is pretty good as well. I don't know if you've got anything there to add, Ian.
Yeah, so the bit that is not working is the emailing bit from Classroom, and I think Office 365 and Outlook is our email system at the moment. So it makes sense not to be operating two email environments, because that is complicated for people. And I think the Google information, it's very comprehensive, but it's a super simple system. And there are examples on Google's website as well that you might wish to use, but they are all quite American, so it might not feel particularly relevant. And that's really for you to kind of judge, depending on the people you're communicating information with. We might have to make some of the demo emails available from our pilot last August.
That would be good, actually. We could maybe incorporate that into the advice as well. And the guidance that went out to head teachers is also going to be on the site. Well, it is on the site. It's under the communication channels bit of the digital section. So you can read that there. Lots of appendices and so on for you to refer to too. And if all of that doesn't answer your questions, you can always get hold of me, Karen.McLeod, at southlanarkshire.gov.uk, and then I'll just pass your question to Ian, probably.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. That's very kind. Rich, if any final questions, then please drop them in the chat. Hopefully, I've tried to kind of be as comprehensive as we can with the demonstration and, kind of information in the pilot, just to give you a full. I think we've got a question here.
I think we might.
Do we have any support videos for parents and pupils that we could use as part of our own setup process? So not at the moment, but something that's certainly in development. So the best place to find those will be in the SLC Staff Learning Centre. And I'd like to think come August we'll have something in place for the new session, because I think we're only 12 and a half working days away, or 12 days away now from the summer holidays. So
but there's so much to do in those 12 days, Ian.
And if people are putting together their own videos, I guess it's just a case of being mindful not to expose any data from the Glow environment, any child names or kind of personal information, email addresses in the videos.
And I think that is maybe where it would be helpful if we could provide these, I suppose, isn't it? Because we can just use anonymised data. But yeah, so I don't think there is anything else in the chat.
Okay. I
think we're nearly an hour bang on. Brilliant.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Karen, for coming in. I mean, that's really exciting. I think, all these tools are really helpful in terms of helping us support learning at home. I think garden email is going to be, really popular. And I think if, schools are getting this set up and they find in August, September, October time something that's been really working for them, we'd probably really like to hear about those kind of the stories there and the impact.
Absolutely.
So, we can look at case studying it to support others across the authority. So just a little thanks here from Jim saying really useful, really clear, and the format of the webinar.
Jim, this is something that Ian's also kind of brought to us as well. I think it is a really nice, clean way to do these things. So yes, thank you.
Jim, find me on Glow, email me, and I can send some information through to you. And I think an idea for a webinar that we have is how can we support other staff in delivering, webinars for their schools and communities like this, because it's really powerful, and if we're going to be doing this for a little while, it's really important to be able to do it right, isn't it?
Yeah. So all that's left to say is a huge thank you again to you, Ian, and Larkhall Academy for doing the pilot for us. It really helped move things on, and as Paul alluded to right at the beginning, this is something that we've been trying to get across South Lanarkshire for a number of years now. So it really did help to push it through, and also now is going to benefit any other schools who have their Glow local authorities who have their tenancy with Glow. They can now make use of this feature, and I think at this time when more and more people are using Google Classroom, it's almost a no-brainer, really, isn't it?
No, thanks, Karen. I just feel really fortunate to work with a great bunch of people at Larkhall Academy who were kind of up for turning it on, and we had it by the end about 40 members of staff switched on, involved with the 10-week pilot, which is really great, and the uptake since rolling out has increased as well. So no, big thanks to everyone at Larkhall Academy. Absolutely,
and really helps your learners and parents too. So that's great. Okay, folks. So thanks for joining us,
lovely.
And we'll see you for another session soon. Bye for now.
Goodbye in tandem. Bye.
Bye.